Hi, I'm Jen from Grainline Studio, and I want to welcome you to a new series I'm really excited about called Making Space to Make. Over the next year, we're going to work through organizing our sewing spaces together. But before you think, ugh, not another challenge, I'll feel guilty about not finishing, this is not that. We have all seen my attempts at Me Made May. They're not great, and I wouldn't do that to you or to myself. This also is not about having an Instagram perfect sewing room or following some rigid system. This is about one simple goal, and that's being able to sew more. Because when you can find your tools, when your machine is in good working order, and when you know where that perfect fabric is hiding, you actually sew. And I think that's what we're all here for. So, if you're ready to make space, both physical and mental, to create more, let's dive in. A lot of what we'll be covering in this series comes from my own experience over the past 2 years. I transitioned from having an external studio space to working from home, and that required some serious reorganization and rethinking of how I work. I can easily get stuck in what I call a planning loop, thinking that everything needs to be organized perfectly before I can start a new project. But that's not realistic, and it's definitely not the point unless my hobby is just organizing sewing supplies instead of sewing. That said, we do need to be able to find things. We need our tools and machines in good working order, and we need to know where items are when we need them. This series is about setting up and maintaining a physical and mental space that works for you. Not for social media, not for some organizing expert's idea of perfect, but for you and how you actually sew. I am actually a messy person at heart. Growing up, my room was a complete disaster, and honestly, I still have nightmares about it sometimes, and I'm pretty sure my mom does too. But I've learned that for my brain to function properly and for me to have the mental space that I need to create, I need to keep a reasonably organized space because the physical clutter just adds more clutter to my brain. And yes, we will talk about functional storage solutions and organization systems because I do love that type of thing. But more importantly, we'll focus on what you actually need to create and how to maintain those things so you're ready to sew when inspiration strikes. I also want to be clear, I know not everyone has a dedicated sewing room. Some of you are sewing at the dining room table or in a corner of your bedroom or maybe a shared craft space. I've been there, and this series absolutely works for you too. We're focusing on the principles and the thinking behind organization. I'm not prescribing how your space has to look. Your dining table setup can work just as well as a dedicated room, as long as it's functional for you. Here's how the series will work. Every Friday, I'll release a new video focusing on one aspect of sewing room organization. Some weeks we'll tackle specific areas like thread organization, fabric stash, or pattern storage. Other weeks we'll focus on maintenance, like cleaning your machine, sharpening scissors, and checking your tools. And some weeks will be about the mental side, like defining boundaries and deciding what to keep and what to let go of. Each week focuses on just one smaller task, something you can most likely tackle in an hour or two. My goal here was to create small, manageable steps instead of the overwhelming overhauls that lead to burnout and a bigger mess than when you started. Now here's what's really important. This is not a challenge. There is no prize for following along perfectly, and likewise, there's no guilt if you skip a week or a month. I want you to think of this as a helpful resource library that you can dip into whenever you need it. If you're watching this when the series first launches, you'll get a new video every Friday, and you can follow along at whatever pace works for you. If a topic doesn't apply to you, or you're feeling overwhelmed, just skip that week. If you're finding this series later on, after more videos are available, even better, you've got a whole library to choose from. You can start from the beginning or jump straight to whatever topic is your biggest pain point. I've organized these topics in a specific order that builds throughout the year, starting with basics like assessing your sewing practice and quick wins, then moving into deeper organization, and finally into maintaining systems. If you're following along from the start, that progression might be helpful, but there's absolutely no requirement to go in order. Once the videos are published, you can browse by topic, looking for fabric storage, notions organization, workspace setup. You'll be able to find exactly what you need. Just check the playlist or the blog to see what's available. The bottom line, whether you're here from day one or joining us 6 months in, use this series in whatever way serves you best. Take what's helpful, skip what's not, and go at your own pace. So, what's the point of all this? Why spend time organizing instead of just sewing? What I've learned is that when your space works for you instead of against you, everything just gets a little bit easier. You spend less time looking for things and more time actually making. You feel less overwhelmed when you sit down to sew, and you can finish projects because you have everything you need at hand. You might discover fabric you forgot you had. I know I sure did. And you'll actually use those patterns you've been collecting. Most importantly, you remove the friction between the idea of I want to sew and actually sitting down to do it, and that's huge. Now, I'm not going to promise that organizing your space will magically solve all of your sewing problems or you'll suddenly become wildly productive. Life is still life, but I can tell you that when the physical and mental barriers are lower and when you've taken care of the practical stuff, it's so much easier to actually create, and that's really what we're after. If you're ready to get started with me, here's what I recommend. First, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the weekly videos. Second, take a look around your sewing space or wherever you sew and think about what's the biggest barrier to me sewing right now. Is it that you can't find your scissors, you can't remember what patterns you own, or maybe you have fabric everywhere and no idea what to make with it? If you're watching this at launch, week 1 will be coming out next Friday and focuses on assessing your sewing practice so you can determine what you want to accomplish with it this year. We'll be tackling different topics each week, and you can follow along as they come out. As I mentioned earlier, if you're finding this series after several videos have been published, you have options. You can either go back to week 1 and follow the progression, or you can jump straight to that topic that addresses your biggest pain point. And please leave a comment and tell me what's the biggest barrier to sewing for you right now. What's the organizing challenge that's most frustrating for you? I read every comment, and I'd love to get an idea of what you're struggling with or what you'd like to improve. Your feedback helps me know what to focus on in future videos. I'm really looking forward to going through this series with you, not because I think we all need perfect sewing rooms, we absolutely do not, but because I know how good it feels when you can just make, when the only thing standing between you and a finished project is the actual sewing, not hunting for supplies or feeling overwhelmed by the mess. So, let's make some space, both literal and mental, to create more of what we love. I'll see you next Friday for our first topic. Happy sewing!